This video is about the vertebral column, and it also will show you the sternal the thoracic cage or the rib cage. Here's the model that we'll be looking at. You have to get back from the camera so that you can see it. There's the anterior aspect, and then here's the posterior aspect, which we'll be looking a lot at. Okay, so let's start out with the vertebrae. There are different regional vertebrae. In another video we'll look at them individually, but now we look at them as a unit right here. The first 7 vertebrae right here are called cervical vertebrae. That means they're in the neck. And then the next 12 vertebrae right here are called thoracic vertebrae. There's 12 of them, and they are the ones that articulate with the ribs, to form the thoracic or rib cage. Then as we come down below those, and notice the vertebrae are getting bigger as we go down. You probably don't realize it, but these skyscrapers, the biggest floor is the floor on the ground, and then they get smaller as you go to the top. And your vertebral column is the same way. After the 12 thoracic vertebrae, then you come to the 5 lumbar vertebrae, 5 lumbar vertebrae, and then finally you come down to the last part, is called the sacrum. It's fused bones. We'll look at these individually in another video. Okay, so let's review that. We've got what? We've got 7 cervical vertebrae in the neck, and then 12 thoracic vertebrae in the region of the ribs, and then we have 5 lumbar vertebrae, and then finally we have the sacrum. So, and it's a series of fused bones, and at the end of the sacrum, broken off on this one right here, there's a coccyx or tailbone, COCCYX. So that's and we'll be looking at each one of those bones in a future video. 7 cervical, 12 thoracic, 5 lumbar, and then the sacrum. Now, we also will look at the first 2 cervical vertebrae are special vertebrae, because this is where the skull articulates. When we study the skull, we'll see it has occipital condyles for sitting on that first atlas vertebrae, and the second one is called the axis, and so we'll be looking at those. Now, let's take a look at the ribs. The ribs articulate. Remember what that means. They're in position and they're touching. They articulate with the vertebrae. They come out of the vertebrae in the back, and this is the vertebral end of the rib, and it articulates with that vertebrae 3 places. 3 places gives it stability. You can have 3 legs on a stool. Okay, it articulates 2 places on the body of the vertebrae and 1 place on the transverse process. The transverse process is the stick out on the vertebrae. We'll see that in the next video. So it articulates how many places? 3 places in the posterior part of the rib, or the vertebral end of the rib. Now, in the front, what we're going to see in the front that the ribs, this is called your sternum, or a common name is the breastbone. Okay, the main part's called the body of that sternum. The top part of it's called the manubrium. Okay, and then down here, this lower end, it's broken off a little bit, just like the coccyx was broken off of the sacrum. These models do this. A lot of people handle them and look at them, but that's called the xiphoid process. So this bone is called the sternum. The top part is the manubrium. This part is the body of the sternum, and then the little tip is called the xiphoid process. Sticks out. Now another thing you'll notice, the ribs do not articulate directly with the sternum. There are cartilages. These are called chondral cartilage. Chondral. That means, and so they're connecting the sternal end of the rib to the sternum itself. Okay. The other thing we notice is that we have 12 ribs on each side. We can count them up, and the first ones are connected by that cartilage. Okay, and then all the way down to here. But then there are 2 ribs at the bottom, and again, I guess they're here. Sometimes you never can tell what's on a model that's been looked at by a lot of people. These are the floating ribs. Ribs 11 and rib 12 are not connected to the sternum, so therefore they're called floating ribs. Floating ribs. So let's review this real quickly. Okay. The vertebral column, and we'll see how they're packed. These are the 7 cervical vertebrae. Okay, they're the ones in the neck. Then we come down to the chest region, and what are these vertebrae called? These are called the thoracic vertebrae, and they're getting bigger as you go down. There's 12 of those thoracic vertebrae, 5 lumbar vertebrae, and then finally some fused bones called the sacrum. Okay, and then the other part of the of the vertebral column is the rib cage. And remember, the rib cage or thoracic cage articulates in the back in 3 places. 2 places on the body of the vertebrae. We'll see what that means when we look at the vertebrae individually. And then 1 place on the transverse process. So that gives it stabilization. And these are the vertebral ends of the ribs. And then when we look on the front part, we'll see the sternum or breastbone, the manubrium, the body, and the xiphoid process. And the first 10 pairs of ribs are connected to the sternum by way of cartilage. And then the 11th and 12th ribs, as you can see as I bring it around here, the 11th rib has been broken off. As I say, when a lot of people handle these, things happen. And then there's the 12th rib. Okay, so as you can see, I just have a little funny right here to tell you. You like a little funny? Remember in the previous video where I kept finding hair on the skeleton? Turns out that when I was back in the stock room, I found the wig. So they put a wig on the skeleton. I thought, now I know where the hair comes from. It was the same color as the hair that I was finding. Maybe when we do the skull, I don't like handling wigs, but maybe I'll get it out and put it on the skull. That would be some fun. Okay, so that's the vertebral column, and the rib cage.